Welcome to the Weird Rap Discussion Gang. We're here with our special guest, ... from Austin. We got Chief in the Doomsday Device, and we got Beverly Fresh. And I am the Mole. And today, we're discussing intros, interludes, skits, things of that nature on rap albums. So, let's get into it. First in the queue, I got Mr. Hood at Pickle's Jewelry from the Mr. Hood album by KMD.
Let's enter this jewelry shop.
Come on, Mr. Pickle, man, hook it up. 14K death bracelet. It can't be.
No, I cannot do that. This is not a pawn shop. This is Pickle's Jewelry. Ah, Mr. Hood, my favorite customer. What can I do for you today?
I would like to see some gold rings.
Ah, yes, we have these dookie fat gold rings, perfect for your masculine hands.
Some earrings for my wife.
How about these elephant-studded diamond earrings, perfect for the woman of your dream?
And a watch for my cousin.
Ah, yes, we have a Rolex.
That
Now,
is
let's
a
see,
beautiful watch.
$3,792.
No, actually, it's 2,336.
Many thanks for
He's
your
always
help.
trying to jerk people.
My name is Mr. Hood. What is your name?
Yeah, I'm Zelda of X.
Yes, an album full of awesome interludes of that nature. I believe comes from some like language instruction record, is the voice of Mr. Hood. Yeah, who chose this track? Was this you, Chief?
Yeah.
What you gotta say about it?
You're right first about this album having like various cool skits. I was torn between this and trying to find something where they use the Burt voice. But I ultimately went with this one just because I love the way that they use that language tape. And I didn't even realize this. I keep forgetting about older stuff, but that they didn't chop that up digitally. You know, like all that was chopped up using like a sequencer. So they had to cue stuff and line it up and do it like old school style, basically by hand, to make them say like what they wanted to say. But the conversation just works so well. I picked this one, but I also should have included Mr. Hood meets Onyx, because I love when Onyx, the Birthstone Kid, and Mr. Hood get into the back and forth.
Yeah.
He's all like, your mother likes to visit the old churches.
Yeah.
Doom was definitely RP Doom, by the way, was somebody who really kept that style for basically his whole career of finding these really obscure samples to use for his skits and his interludes. But yeah, I found that interesting because I don't listen to a lot of KMD. And I think the only time I've ever listened to KMD was when I was listening to Black Bastards, just on like a Doom deep dive. But yeah, it's definitely a style that he stayed with consistently throughout his entire career.
Yeah, kind of the technique, the cut up techniques here seemed a lot more subversive than than novel. You know, I think it's like almost like some of Burroughs' theories about like cutting up and through appropriation, like as a weapon. So like using something as a mirror back against itself. So I think that's like kind of brings out the short-sightedness of those language tapes, how they're like catering to a very narrow conception of culture and language. I love how kind of deadpan the humor is in it. Like they're like really playing it up, and I think they did a good job like acting, you know, in the skit. And I think that's one of the things that like going back and doing a deeper dive into skits of like seeing the level of commitment sometimes. Like sometimes it's more candid and outright a joke, and sometimes people really commit to the bit. And I thought this was a good one because if it was too jokey, I think that critique wouldn't stand. So I thought the tone of this was right on.
That's actually exactly what I was wanting to get into with subtext, that sort of, on the one hand, appropriation. And then I don't think necessarily gentrification is the right word, but what Mr. Hood is supposed to represent versus like the way that he throws back these stereotypes at him in this very cut and dry manner. And it's like when Zeb Love X is talking about how he needs money, you know, and he's trying to sell jewelry at the jewelry store, but then Mr. Pinocchio's all trying to hook up Mr. Hood. And then Zeb Love X is like, man, I'm broke, I need some money. And he gives him directions to the crack house. Like, here, go sell some drugs,
Do you need a spoon? They're not expensive.
Yeah, what's the story of Mr. Hood? Does it explain like who he is, where he's from, what his deal is? I don't remember.
So it's kind of my understanding of it is like the outsider from the culture that's acting like they're down, but in a very sort of entitled way, just the way he is like, oh, I'll just take I'll take my time at the barbershop, or I'll drink a 40 with the guys, or I know where the drug house is. And I think that's sort of supposed to be, like Beverly was saying, holding a mirror up to this supposed image that like hood, quote unquote, residents get, as to where KMD is sort of trying to come from this approach of, well, yes, we may not live in the best circumstances, and sometimes we got to hustle to get by, but we're not animals, we're not just these monsters. We're actually real people with like real thoughts and have real things to express,
A lot of times, if somebody is coming at rap from like an outsider perspective, it's almost like being on safari, where they'll just treat the artists and the cultural moments as something to point at and be fascinated by rather than appreciated. So it's like looking at a rhino.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea I got. It still confuses me why he's called Mr. Hood, though. He should be called Mr. tourist or something. But I don't know.
I think he's just being tongue in cheek with the name, basically.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to the intro track for this is Raekwon's Only Built for Cuban Links album. Track titled Striving for Perfection.
Yo, son, check the fly shit, son. Yo, baby, check it, man. I got a new connect, son. For real, man. Fuck all this 24 brick shit, man. My man got out of state for 15. You know what I'm saying? Yo,
my man's in the NBA. They politicking to death, so it's all good. What's up?
God, we gotta move, God. We gotta migrate. Get the fuck out of New York, you know what I'm saying? Bounce, man. Start fucking with bigger and better shit, man.
So you telling me no more Big H, strictly
no more, man. No more, God. It's a pot of gold right here, man. This is it, man. This is glory.
The first thing we gotta do, man, is just know what we gonna do with this cream when we get it, man.
Right.
I'm not trying to just be sitting on motherfucking.
All right, D-Dot, this was your pick. Tell us about it.
I absolutely love this album. Only Built for Cuban Links is a masterpiece. It's kind of like a crime story, but similar to a lot of crime stories. It's a story about someone trying to get out of crime. So the first track is basically like, you ever play that game God of War? All right. So in the second God of War, the main character dies, goes to Hades, and has to literally claw his way out of hell. This album is sort of like trying to claw your way out of hell. And this first track is them expressing the desire to no longer be in hell. So striving for perfection.
Yeah. Yeah, from what I understood, this is like a kind of like a reflection of what they were really going through at the time, like getting their first kind of hit of fame and finances from music and sort of wanting to make the most of it. The book From the Streets of Shaolin by Skits Fernando, it goes into this album track by track, and it has like a really nice kind of summary of this track, which I'd like to read. Cinematic in scope, it begins and ends. The album begins and ends with extended spoken word pieces. RZA encouraged his crew to portable DAT players to capture spontaneous inspiration, and Ray and Ghost put theirs to use with homemade skits that reflected their state of mind. It also, before that, mentions how they went to a resort in Barbados and then a hotel in Miami to do all the writing for this album and also recording these skits. So they're kind of like, you know, they've kind of gotten away from everything from their neighborhoods and stuff to work on this album and, you know, make it something special and make it count. And so in Striving for Perfection, the album's intro, they have a conversation that establishes the album's loose plot, which follows two seasoned criminals who vow to take down one more big score before getting out of the game entirely. The album, metaphorically speaking, represents the big caper, and pulling it off will deliver them from the street life. Then, yeah, it goes into like how this is Ghostface. I'm hanging this shit up. If the shit don't work right here, God, I got shot at. My mom's windows got shot the fuck up, man. And this is like him referring to an actual incident where
Raekwon shot out his windows.
Yeah, right. And that's like the great like backstory, the irony of, you know, their relationship is that they were like mortal enemies before RZA kind of got him into a room and they were ready to kill each other, but then they became the best of friends. And it goes on and on about this, but one other thing I'll mention is this part. The confessional sounds all the more earnest, set to the plaintive opening theme of The Killer, composed by Lowell Lowe. John Woo's classic 1989 Hong Kong action film starring Chow Yun-fat, in fact, serves as the conceptual framework for Only Built for Cuban Links. And then it talks about how that movie's themes kind of mirror the themes of the album and the relationship between Raekwon and Ghost. But yeah, it's a great book. I highly recommend it.
I think that last point you made is my favorite little subtle touch of this intro, with one of the most iconic skits ever being Ray asking Meth where his killer tape is on the first Woo album. So it's awesome that on Raekwon's solo album, he's using like the open end of The Killer to set the mood for his whole album. It's just a really fitting full circle that I always enjoyed. Great movie, by the way, too, if y'all haven't seen it.
Yeah, just like D-Dot said, I mean, this was one of my favorite tapes when it came out. I played the hell out of it. And I was thinking, coming back to it now, I was thinking like there's a lot of skits like going into this. I thought like the Chronic, the Pyramid parody. There was a lot of like great stuff that people did, but I would always usually fast forward through it after I got it. But this one I never did. I was like, let it play through. And I think maybe because it was like almost like cinema verite in a way, and it like does a good job of setting the mood. And like you feel that longing, that kind of like calm before the storm. And then like when the beat comes in, then that like that rush and that I guess the necessity, the desperation, the striving is really punctuated by this kind of long, like kind of melodic intro. And like there's a certain tension that's built up that saying sets the tone for what's to come after. But yeah, I think what Skits put together is amazing. I haven't read that yet.
Should we move on to Outkast from the Southern Playalistic Cadillac Music album, Flimflam?
What's up, man? I got these gold chains, 14K, ate it out. Hey, before you say anything, got off some white folks in Buckhead.
Man,
14K.
I don't need no change, man. I don't need nothing. I'm straight.
Now check game, $80, bro. 14K gold is what I'm trying to tell you now. Look, check it out.
Man, what nigga, you trying to play me some fool or something?
I said 14 motherfucking K. White folks in the Buckhead,
go on,
man.
Go on, nigga.
Man, oh, that's a motherfucking pimp. Nigga, what's up? No, man, holla at a nigga, man. $80 for this 14 karat gold chain, man. What it is?
I'll give you a sack, nigga. What's up with that?
All right. I looked up if anyone's... Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say real quick, I looked up the definition of flim-flam, which I didn't know till today. It means deceptive nonsense.
Yeah, so I picked this one for a couple reasons. One, because I think Outkast, Goody Mob, Dungeon Family, like they had kind of like a suite of skits throughout albums that I think gave an insight into, I don't know, their life back home, like kind of what you might encounter day to day. I think on Still Standing, like there's a group of people going to the record store and they're like reacting, and like some of them are into the album, some of them are talking shit about it or misunderstanding the hook, So it's like, I can imagine how, they're super important to the hip hop culture. And then even, I'm guessing more so in their hometown of Atlanta. But then they kind of encounter all of this like day to day of like dealing with the stardom or just the day to day routine. So I think these skits help put things in context. And I first thought of this one specifically because there's like one line where he goes, he like pauses for a second, the flimflam guy, and he's like, Matt Mo. And I don't know what it is, if it's like a little stutter or mispronunciation or a slang term that I'm not up on. But I remember when my cousin found that and he's like, oh, listen to this skit on Outkast. And we would just like play it over and over, like trying to figure out what he said. And then we started using it to like mean a lot of different things. And I think it was just like one of those iconic, like kind of pre-internet, bored as hell, like where you just like go through movies and you find stuff and rewind it and get obsessed with like mistakes or things that are normally overlooked. So this, like, to me was like one of those iconic skits for that personal reason as well. And which, yeah, I don't know if it's a mistake in the recording or if I'm something I'm not up on, but that was like that moment that we kind of deconstructed and exaggerated over time.
Hell yeah.
What did it mean to you though? What definition did you give it?
It was, it's just kind of like random. Like it could punctuate something, you like say what and then like end it with the map mo to like kind of like, like emphasize something.
Yeah, it's like onomatopoeia almost.
Yeah.
I always liked how like, even if it's these that seem like sort of slice of life moments in the Outkast albums, or the ones that are kind of like pre-prepared skits, they all really work as like these subtle pieces of world building throughout their albums. Like they set little nice moods for the movements of each album, and then they all sort of like connect across albums really well. And little shout outs and shit they do, like when they're driving around, they're listening to a parental advisory in this skit, which is like the group right before them and the Dungeon Family connection. So yeah, there's just little like all kind of nice little world building and like personal shout outs and in jokes, it feels like, throughout all those skits that Outkast does.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. I got next up I got Ice-T's Shut Up Be Happy, which is the first track on the album The Iceberg / Freedom of Speech Just Watch What You Say from 1989. It starts off with like 35 seconds of just like rain and thunder and this church bell, which is actually stolen outright from the Black Sabbath sample that comes in. It's like a lot of Black Sabbath. It's basically like a mashup of Black Sabbath and this Jello Biafra recording, but I think they use it to great effect. So let's hear a bit of that.
We interrupt this program with a special bulletin. America is now under martial law. All constitutional rights have been suspended. Stay in your homes. Do not attempt to contact loved ones, insurance agents, or attorneys. Shut up. Do not attempt to think or depression may occur. Stay in your home. Curfew is at 7 p.m. sharp after work. Anyone caught outside the gates of their subdivision sector.
Like Zach was saying about the Raekwon intro, I think it's just like a great way to set the tension, set the stage for this album, and for that first song to come in afterwards. That's kind of why I chose all the tracks. All my tracks are intros to albums that I feel like are just set a really great dramatic tone and get you ready and psyched for that first song that plays after.
Was that album from the Body Count era?
It was from before that, actually, like, which is interesting. I think that he'd experienced his own problems with, censorship prior to that, but nothing like he experienced later with Body Count. Yeah, this was 1989 this came out, and I think Body Count was like a couple years later or something.
Yeah, Body Count was like 91 or 92, I think, if I remember right. This was the album after Power, if I remember correctly in its chronology.
Yeah.
But he even came though from that same LA scene that like all the LA guys came from. Like,
he was like one of the first.
Mm-hmm. Because like for anybody that's seen fucking Breaking 1 or Breaking 2, like he's in there rapping, but he's got all like the rock and roll, like hardcore shit going on and whatnot. So he's definitely been down with that scene for a long time, but it is interesting of him to straight up use Black Sabbath to start his album. I like the whole Big Brother tone that Jello Biafra sets with it too.
Yeah, he just has such a great voice too. It's just like maniacal, like psychotic voice. It's the last person you'd want to hear over a loudspeaker telling you have no rights.
Yeah, I love that he says "shut up" twice.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was when this came out. I didn't know the reference till like years later. And then even now, like I know who like Jello was, like kind of looked him up afterwards, but I still don't like grasp all of his output. But his name will just get stuck in my head on repeat, just randomly for like the past like 15 years. I don't know what the hell it is, like some kind of weird virus that just gets stuck.
He's got one of those names, man. It's an extremely unique name.
Did you guys hear I think it was either the Mark Maron or the Cypher podcast with Ice-T? I think both of them were really great. And he talked about his influence of heavy metal in that, like early on. And like, I was thinking about the Rhyme Syndicate and like how he was kind of not like Wu-Tang, pre-Wu-Tang, but he was like, building a group of people and trying to give them platforms, like even Everlast, like way before House of Pain was down with him.
Forever Everlasting.
Yeah.
And Divine Styler.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So that was cool. He was like such a singular figure, but I think he used it to try to help other people out.
Yeah, Ice-T, he's an interesting dude. The fact that like you wouldn't expect him to have all the metal and punk associations and also the Cool Keith association. He's kind of a chameleon of sorts.
One other thing that you did touch upon a little bit, but when I was writing my notes, I wrote it down too. I do like how it's such a dramatic, big brothery, like set of rules in this intro.
We will collect your piss.
Yeah. But then the next song, the song right after it is like, they are kind of following the rules because it's just two people. It's Ice-T like talking to one other person, but all he's talking about is just like vice and like illegal shit, and fucking immoral stuff. So
yeah,
it's great. It's a great like way to get the ball rolling on that album.
All right. I got Bistro queued up. This is from the Madvillain album, Madvillainy, and I think it's track 4.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the debut grand opening of Madvillain Bistro Bed and Breakfast Bar Grill Cafe Lounge on the water, where we offer you the finest of the finer things.
How do you do?
24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Live on the beats, We have the one and only Madlib.
How do you do?
We also have King Ghidra on the mix. Yesterday's new quintet is here. Victor Vaughn, Quasimodo, and I'm your host, the super villain.
Madvillain is probably my favorite album of any genre ever. I was listening to an interview with Peanut Butter Wolf. He was on Juan Epstein, and he was talking about how when they first did the Madvillain album, how hard it was for him to even find Doom in the first place. But once he did, Doom just kind of showed up at his house and started living there in order to start making the album. So there'll be moments on the album where he's just talking about doing bong hits on the roof in the West Coast because he was at Peanut Butter Wolf's house. So this album is just basically him throwing all these shout outs to all of the different side projects of Madlib mainly, and everybody that's on Stone's Throw. And it just kind of follows this pattern on that whole album where you're just kind of wondering what's going on, but it all just sounds very old. It sounds like it's from a different era. It sounds vaudevillian. It sounds like it might be the soundtrack to a silent movie. And that's what I took from this.
I found a little trivia from this where he says it's where he's talking about Hookie and Baba or something.
Oh, Big Hookie and Baba from the laundromat.
Yeah. Supposedly that's a reference to a comic book made by Jeff Jank, the art director of Stone's Throw Records. And he had a lewd comic book called Hookie and Baba, which was sold exclusively in San Francisco laundromats to local winos. So, very obscure reference.
That's awesome. He even threw a couple of his own references in there.
Victor Vaughn, King Ghidra, all of their side projects.
I love the way they flipped the fucking sample on here too. That Atlantic Star sample is really nice that they used on here. And then just the little vocal samples they sprinkled in are funny as hell too.
Yeah, I like the setting of a bistro. I think is very specific connotation somehow in the atmosphere that it kind of creates.
Yeah. And it's not just a bistro. It's a bistro, bed and breakfast, bar and grill, cafe, lounge on the water.
Right. On the water. It's a very inviting setting.
Yeah. This is Beverly's pick. This is The Shack by the Dove Shack. Originally released on the Warren G album a year prior, but it didn't have this intro. Let's hear that.
Okay, here go the house I was telling y'all about.
That motherfucker right there.
They be tripping in there, but don't nobody live in there. Listen, real quiet and you can hear some shit going on in there.
I ain't scared.
I ain't scared though.
Come on, let's go up in that bitch. I ain't scared, nigga.
You down? Come on, let's go take a trip.
Brandy.
Dang, girl, watch your step. You gonna bust your ass.
Damn, you too high. You too high, girl.
I still don't hear nothing. I thought you said it's gonna be something.
Lying.
Get your ears checked. Ha, you dumb bitch.
Look
What's over here, nigga? That's big ass.
Look.
Oh, shit. You just see your future in there. Nigga, what is that? Come on, nigga, let's go.
Oh, look at it's a whole gang of dudes.
Told you that.
Come on, nigga.
Less off.
Yeah, I picked this one because I thought it adds a lot of depth or just kind of changes how we enter the track. You know, This is The Shack is kind of just like this, like a poppy G-funk track, just about like an ode to where they hang out, you know, and like this totally complicates that because it's like almost like a haunted house or the notorious house in the block with the crazy person or the old like hermit or something that like all these like myths are circulating around the neighborhood. So now the shack isn't just like a cool party hangout. There's like this weird dark mythology, like that's like kind of becomes like a precursor to it. And then I thought it's also just well crafted. I mean, like the sound design and all of that, I think is really top notch. And like the commitment to of like throwing the kid in with a stutter, or like he's just like so scared or whatever, is like an interesting choice. I'll leave it at that. I'll let you guys jump in.
I like the commitment to the performances too, like especially if that is the actual members of the Dove Shack and not just like other guys hanging around the studio. But I think one of them, the female voice, has got to be like one of the 5-footers, I'm guessing. But yeah, like that haunted house point was perfect. Like it really does make it sound like this super dangerous, like Tales from the Hood type scene.
Yeah.
And then you creak the door open and it's like the 180-degree opposite vibe.
Yeah, I felt
and
like
I hadn't even. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like it seems like that crew and extended family on the West Coast like love the goofy shit and like the parody of a genre, or like holding on too close to a genre and it kind of becomes humorous. It seemed like the humor on the East Coast and the skits were, I don't know, less silly, maybe. And
I agree with you, with the exception of like Redman. I think it's a thing with funk particularly. So like if you think about like with G-Funk, it's coming from things like Parliament or George Clinton, which are silly inherently. I had never heard of Dove Shack until this. I listened to that and I was like, oh, this must be like some horrorcore shit or some shit. And then it switched up to this front yard barbecue type song. And I was like, oh, wow, I was not expecting this at all. I definitely walked away a fan of Dove Shack. But yeah, it's just, it never ceases to amaze me how front yard G-Funk sounds, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, that's a really good reference. Yeah, the George Clinton over the top kind of showmanship. Yeah, they definitely took that, borrowed heavily from that and made it their own. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I wonder what the intention was in adding this intro to the song. If it was just that they had to do it, they had to change it so that they could re-release it or something, or if they wanted to darken it up somehow or something, if it was too poppy, but I don't know. I never heard the rest of this album. Was it a similar vibe to like this song?
It flips back and forth. There's songs that are kind of lighthearted, like This Is the Shack, or like there's one song where they're just straight up freestyling. I think it's called like Freestyle 90, whatever, that this album came out. But then there's songs like Bomb Drop that are kind of on that darker tone as well, or like they kind of more fit the tone of this little introduction element.
And did Warren G produce this album, or?
He produced, I believe he at least executive produced it, if not straight up produced it all. Because I was looking for the details on this one to try to figure out who all was doing the voice acting in this particular one. But I can find the production credits here in a second.
I thought I heard Warren G as one of the voices in there.
Yeah, he was doing the voice that was kind of like the Sir Nose devoid of funk voice, like right when the song starts.
Oh, I know that, but I thought he was one of the kids also.
Oh, he probably could have been.
He might have been.
Warren G production confirmed on this song, which makes sense because, like you said, it was on Warren G's solo album as well.
Well, I still love that Regulate album. Do you think that I should listen to this Dove Shack album? Like, is the rest of it produced by Warren G too?
It seems like it's a bunch of people that are like under Warren G's wing.
Right.
It's not a bad album. It's just not the same level as Warren G or like what Dre was putting out. But I've even listened to it recently and still enjoy it.
Yeah, I liked it, and I liked the Twins album too. Like those were like, you know, the second tier of that family, but they were still solid. But yeah, like Chief was saying, not at the same level. But I think, solid and overlooked in a way.
Yeah, I wish the 5-footers would have got to put something out too. That would have been a nice way to complete the whole crew.
Right. All right. Well, we're gonna get into Mortal Man next. This is basically the final track on the To Pimp a Butterfly album, Kendrick Lamar. I think it starts about 5 minutes into the track after the song Mortal Man. Kendrick starts reading this poem, which he's like, throughout the album, he's teasing this poem out. He starts the poem and stops it, starts it again and stops it a little bit later for like 5 different tracks in the album. And then finally he reads the whole poem at the end of this song. And then that leads into him interviewing Tupac, which is like a sample-based recreation of an actual Tupac interview, but the interviewer is replaced with Kendrick, and then Kendrick also then reads another poem to Tupac, and it's a pretty elaborate outro for it's like about 7 minutes long, I think, after the song plays. So let's hear some of that. This is right after Kendrick finishes his first poem.
Shit, and that's all I wrote. I was gonna call it another nigga, but it ain't really a poem. I just felt like it's something you probably could relate to. Other than that, now that I finally got a chance to holler at you, I always want to ask you about a certain situation, about a metaphor actually. You spoke on the ground. What you mean by that? What the ground represent?
The ground is gonna open up and swallow the evil.
Right.
That's how I see it. My word is born. I see, and the ground is the symbol for the poor people.
Right.
The poor people is gonna open up this whole world and swallow up the rich people. Because the rich people are gonna be so fat and they're gonna be so appetizing. You know what I'm saying? Wealthy, appetizing. The poor gonna be so poor and hungry.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's gonna be like, you know what I'm saying? It's gonna be. There might be some cannibalism out this month. They might eat the rich. You know what I'm saying?
All right. So let me ask you this then. Do you see yourself as somebody that's rich or somebody that made the best of their own opportunities?
I see myself as a natural born hustler, a true hustler in every sense of the word. I took nothing, I took the opportunities. I worked at the most menial and degrading job and built myself up so I can get it to where I owned it.
I spent a long time studying the footnotes and stuff on this today because I realized I never really understood the theme of To Pimp a Butterfly and what that
it's incredible
metaphor means. But yeah, it's pretty awesome to learn about.
It's incredible. Yeah, it took me like 3 listens to get it, but I remember listening to the album the first time, hearing it and hearing him have this poem that was basically broken up in between the songs and just wondering, what are you getting at and why aren't you finishing this? And I felt like I couldn't just skip ahead to figure out why he was doing that because of how intricate it all was. And by the time I got to the end, after the song Mortal Man, and he started doing the Tupac interview, I immediately thought around Section 80, before Good Kid, Mad City came out, he did this interview where he talked about how he had a dream about Tupac saying that his legacy couldn't die as long as there were people like him making certain music. Now, I remember reading that interview, just kind of writing it off as another person deifying Tupac because that's something that happens so often. But 2 albums later, he put out To Pimp a Butterfly, and he basically made an entire album off of that idea. That idea that Tupac always championed, but never quite lived up to. Early Tupac albums were like conscious rap albums, but eventually he ended up getting kind of swallowed up by his image. And he kind of cast aside more of the more revolutionary talk in exchange for the thug image. On this album, Kendrick Lamar seems like he's walking a tightrope between the idea of being conscious and the reality of gangster shit. And by the time he finally gets to the end of the album, he seems like he's kind of quarreling with which is more important. And that's what I took from this. Is it okay to deify a mortal man? Is it more important to deify ideas? Can you deify an idea?
Yeah, that's a great reading of it. I studied this a long time today, so I have more to say, but go ahead, Chief, you got something to say.
I don't really have anything super in depth to go into with this one, just because it's such a moving and heavy piece. I think that's what always stuck with me with this particular skit and outro. This is probably one of the most haunting endings to a hip hop album that I've ever heard, just because I really like the way the Dot talks about the idea, builds up to, and then you get so wrapped up in this Tupac footage that you've never heard. And then just when Kendrick really kicks the conversation to the next level, Pac is gone. And it's like, oh shit, like it hits like a ton of bricks, like every time, man. And great choice. That's all I can really say about it. I would love to hear some of the research that you said about it, though, because this song and this album just keeps on giving as the years go by.
Yeah. To get everyone on the same page, what Chief was just referring to is how it ends, where he's in the conversation with Tupac, and then he's like, what are your thoughts on that? He's like, Pac? And Pac's silent, and that's how the album ends. So he's like, you're kind of left hanging there at the end. But yeah, I think, D-Dot, what you're saying about Tupac and how Kendrick seemed to take a lot of inspiration from him is right on. And it seems to me like he's trying to do what Tupac did, but then to, instead of getting caught up in the street life and getting shot as it seemed to have, I mean, who knows why Tupac really got shot, but instead of getting
shit.
Yeah. Instead of getting caught up in the street stuff, like he's trying to balance the two worlds of being a leader, having this platform and uplifting his people, and instead of, changing the ending where he overcomes it and spreads his, butterfly wings and leads his people into a better place. And I think both of those poems that he reads before and after the part that we heard are really talking about a struggle to balance those two worlds and to free his people from the struggle that he freed himself from. And like, probably lots of people know this, but like, I didn't know it till today, but the caterpillar in this whole metaphor is, I believe, meant to represent like the street guy. It represents himself as a street guy. It also represents like the average person who's caught up in the system, caught up in capitalism. Also represents like the record label execs that are caught up in capitalism and trying to, pimp the butterfly that the artist is. The butterfly represents the kind of like evolved, ascended person who is able to, hopefully uplift themselves, if not other people as well. And then the cocoon is a big part of this album too, where it's like the pressures of the world, the pressures of the street, the pressures of stardom, create walls around Kendrick, walls around people in general, to where they're isolated or they isolate themselves, or even could be like a prison is another way that you could get isolated. But in this like isolation, you could come to, yourself. You meditate and become yourself, and you dream and begin to spread your wings. And that's the basic idea I got from this. My question was, what is it supposed to mean that we're left with the Tupac being gone and not answering? And I guess my answer to that question, my possible partial answer, is like that Kendrick feels like he's used Tupac as an inspiration, but he's now at the point where Tupac, his story ended, and now he's like kind of on his own to like try to be the butterfly.
Yeah, I agree. I think, D-Dot asked him like a good critical question at the end. And I think I had this moment where, like Chief, I was blown away with the concept initially. And then for just a brief moment, I'm like, I don't know, is he propping up Tupac too much? And Tupac's also like an easy person to go to I don't know, for those early revolutionary references, like he's the go-to icon of that, kind of represents that. So I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about it. But then ultimately I just returned to the work and like realized that it's so strong, so well crafted, so well intended. And I think it's actually really good that he specifically went to Tupac. And I thought about like maybe like Freestyle Fellowship, or like even like the Last Poets or something, like the griot reference, and like going back and to like the ancestors or something, multiple generations, to like rejuvenate some of those techniques and thoughts. Culture moves so fast that you don't even have to go back generations. Like it's like Tupac just happened, but we still haven't figured out what he was saying yet. And what he was saying is still relevant. So I like that he kind of uses as a conduit and as a bridge to what he's doing now, and kind of carrying that on, like Jonah was saying. So yeah, I think it's a brilliant move. And I also like that. I love that this piece got so much critical acclaim, and that it does have this like challenging and experimental structure to it. To me, that's a huge accomplishment.
All right. Let's move on to The Beast by the Fugees from the score. This is the end of the song. After The Beast, this is the interlude.
Let's go to this next Chinese Muslim joint. You get some shrimp fried rice and make salad at the same time. Alright, cool.
You are not alone.
Hey yo, Chang Wang, what's up?
I'll be right out.
Yo, can we get something to eat, man? Chang, can I eat?
Right. 1 second. Okay then, fine. Your order.
All right, let me get 2 of them beef fried rices over here. Let me get a half a chicken wing. Don't put that little retarded leg in it, cause cut that off.
Okay then.
Don't put no onions in my white rice. Yo, I need 4 chicken wings fried hard and shit.
What's this?
I'm not finished.
Hold on. What's this? The 2 of you at once. Okay then. You want beef?
No, we want beef to eat. We ain't got no beef.
I want 4 chicken wings fried hard, nigga. What the fuck are you talking about?
All right. I'll kick your monkey asses my fucking self.
I can see why a bitch ass nigga.
I think this is the only skit that I've ever like listened to on repeat. Like I explicitly remember one day at lunch in high school, me and my homeboy sitting in the back of my friend Eddie's car and just fucking rewinding this shit over and over and listening to it, because it was the funniest shit we'd ever heard at the time, And like as time has gone by, the skit has this weird way of being both more problematic as time goes by.
Oh, definitely.
Also, there's a couple of super problematic moments in it. But then it also just continues to display that sort of weird inherent distrust that there's been between the Black and Asian communities even though both communities have kind of historically been shit on by America, but still, you know, there's always just this beef that we want beef to eat. You know, there's always like this beef that just seems to hang in the air, and confrontation just snaps off like that. It doesn't take much to get like both sides going. But the other reason I picked this skit was because I needed to find out who was doing the Asian voice on there. And I finally discovered who did the voice on there after many, many years of research.
Who?
So, this comedian named Talent. He used to be on like Def Comedy Jam.
Okay.
He was in the movie Sunset Park. Yeah, Talent is funny as hell. I didn't realize he was the guy that was doing the voice, but I finally found out. At least that's who I saw was credited as doing the voice. So, but yeah, this is outside of De La Soul skits. This is the skit that I think of when I think of the concept of skits.
Yeah, well, I thought this was interesting, and I doubt this was their intention in it, but just the fusion of different cultures that's encapsulated in here. You got a Chinese man singing a Michael Jackson song, referencing Burger King, serving like inner city black Haitian immigrants, while Indian sitars are playing in the background. Just a strange, I mean, they probably thought that was Chinese.
A Chinese Muslim.
Yeah, Chinese Muslim
joint.
Yes, right.
But the placement of this skit in the album is interesting too. Like between The Beast, which is a song about like systematic issues with policing, and then Fugees Law, which is like a celebration of them as a crew and just the way they carry themselves among others in the industry. And then you got just this crazy, really odd left field skit that's fucking ridiculous, you know, and hilarious. But
why do you think they put it there?
I don't have an answer for that, man. I've been thinking about that for many, many, many years, and I will never understand.
I wonder what the inspiration was to make it at all.
I think it's literally just some neighborhood shit, man. Yeah. Like, I think that, you know, when you're just in your neighborhood, you might get harassed by the police and then you might go get something to eat.
Yeah.
Touche.
And who owns the spot where you eat? Who owns the liquor store? Who owns the corner store?
You know? Especially in those neck of the woods, you know? Yeah. One thing I've seen float around, and even before the internet, I'd heard it, but I don't know how much I necessarily buy into it. But a lot of people think it was also sort of a soft shot at like those Wu-Tang interludes and whatnot. It was them sort of like having a little light mockery and jest with the interludes that they would do. I don't know what the impudence for that would be.
I thought that it added a sense of like comedic relief to otherwise a kind of dark album. And I don't know if they like intentionally said like we need some comedic relief, but it feels like after this and in other projects, maybe everybody, I guess not Lauryn Hill, but the other two members like had that kind of jokey side to them, or like the hamming up the spotlight kind of thing.
That's
and that
true.
Maybe this album was like a little, I don't know, constrained or like more focused and serious. And like, I think maybe the cowboy song starts to get into that kind of campiness a little bit. But other than that, I think those aspects of their personality were kind of downplayed. So maybe this was a way to relieve some of that or express it.
That's a good point too, considering The Carnival by Wyclef Jean, which came not too long after that, is full of skits like that, you know?
It's true.
All right. This is the first track on America's Most Wanted by Ice Cube, called Better Off Dead.
Hey, Q, boy. What's up? Get your ass up. Time to go. Oh, man, shit. You going for a little walk. Close 7. Hey, man. Hey, man. What? I never did like you. Open it up. Trapping man. All right. Calm down. You got any last words?
Yeah, I got some last words. Fuck all y'all.
Switch.
Was America willing to maintain order, no matter what the cost?
So yeah, again, great tension build up for the next track to play. I think just beautiful Foley, just like a great tense synth tone, and just it really just sets the stage. I learned that Sir Jinx is the person who is credited with coming up with this intro. I think it's kind of a good reflection of Ice Cube's sort of approach for this whole album. It's like this nihilistic rage in the face of social injustice and racism. And a little trivia, I found the little news quote at the very end there. Was America willing to maintain order no matter what the cost? That's from some PBS documentary called Eyes on the Prize 2, America at the Racial Crossroads, 1965 to 1985, about the civil rights movement.
That's the movie, that's the documentary that Judas and the Black Messiah was centered around. Specifically that entry of the Eyes on the Prize series.
What the fuck is pyroclastic?
Where's that? What do you mean?
Ice Cube says it all the time.
Pyroclastic?
Yeah. I swear, I'm not making this up. Ice Cube made this shit up.
Interesting.
I don't know.
Ice Cube says this
I've
shit like all the time. He's like, I got that pyroclastic flow. It's on the next song. It's on like most of his shit. He says it all the time.
Maybe I just never recognized the word because I didn't. Yeah, it's one of those you don't know the word, so it doesn't register. Kind of thing. That's interesting. The one thing that really sticks with you about this introduction is the guard and just how detached from humanity he is. Like clearly, he's walked so many prisoners to the execution chamber that they're not even people anymore. Like, you know, he's not like it's time to execute you. He's like, time to go. You know, just, you got any last words? Fuck all y'all, switch.
Yeah.
Like it's procedural at this point. It's not even like taking a life. It's just a job that he has to do at this point. But it also makes me wonder, was this whole like him walking to the chair, was it kind of sort of a symbolic shot at people who were saying that him leaving NWA was like a death sentence? Because like to my knowledge, this was the album that came out first after he left NWA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he not only did that, he jumped to like the other coast and was like, brought Sir Jinx with him, but he's working with like the Bomb Squad on this album. And until it dropped, nobody knew that it was going to be like the fucking monster of an album it was. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of people probably thought Ice Cube was done when he left NWA.
Yeah, definitely people thought he was dying, but that's mostly true of most groups. Unless it's just like obvious that somebody is much better than everybody else. Most of the time when a group breaks up, people assume you're going to fail, particularly if you're the one that leaves the group and the group stays together. So like think about like David Ruffin. David Ruffin wasn't super popular after the Temptations. He had his moments, but he wasn't extremely popular. So like somebody like Ice or Busy Bone. Busy Bone had his moments, but he wasn't extremely popular after leaving Bone Thugs and Harmony. It's hard to take something that people already love and then convince them to love it less. And that's basically what Ice Cube was doing when he was putting out songs like No Vaseline, and they were already talking shit about him at the time. So of course, everybody thought that his shit was going to flop. And he had to like completely leave the West Coast and go somewhere completely else in order to make his album. But I one thing I found interesting, Ice Cube had like a series of albums that were kind of like themed this way. It was this one, The Predator. What's the other one?
He had Killer Will after this, and then Death Certificate dropped, and then The Predator, and then the album with Really Though on it. Lethal Injection. But
I wouldn't even say that he has an obsession with death as much as he seems to have an obsession with like being punished for the way that he's viewed. Whereas somebody like Tupac had an obsession with death. So all of Ice Cube's early work, at least, was very, very much so focused on the image of being viewed as a predator or like receiving a death sentence, shit like that for the things he was saying.
Yeah, maybe that's what he meant by pyroclastic, like iconoclast, but a fiery iconoclast type of thing.
Oh, I looked up pyroclastic. Relating to, consisting of, or denoting fragments of rock erupted by a volcano.
Yeah, pyroclastic flow specifically is dense, fast-moving flow of solidified lava pieces. Because when I was just trying to look up pyroclastic flow came up. From the National Geographic Society, that's the source for that thing.
Word. So it's not a made-up word. Well, I guess every word is made up.
For our Patreon subscribers, if you want to pay $3, you can go to patreon.com/weirdrap. Get the rest of this discussion and so much more.